Kale, for joining us. And we're very excited to hear how things are going with the Hops. Our shiny star for Hillsboro is our baseball team. And we love you. We love you. We love the team. And we're very sad that we will not be able to see you this season. But this is an opportunity for you to kind of let us know how things are going to go. And of course, we're very interested in the athletes as well and what this means for them. So Kale, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm assuming you're comfortable with having questions throughout your conversation.
Absolutely.
Perfect. All right. So just be respectful. And if you don't have a question, go to mute so we don't hear all your background noise. But if you need to ask a question, you can either do it in chat or you can unmute yourself and ask the question. And here we go. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Deanna, and thanks for the time this morning. And technically, we still don't know if there's going to be a season. We are waiting from the call from MLB. I think there's a lot of people that can make assumptions by this point. But this morning, I was going to give a little bit of a background of kind of what we've been going through over the last 2 months and kind of how this has changed our business and what we have going forward. And so I think back to the day this all started. It's probably a day I'll never forget. It's almost like, where were you when the planes hit the towers? I was sitting in my office and I'd sent an email to Mike Golub, who runs the Timbers, and Chris McGowan, who runs the Blazers. And this was on March 11th. And we had just gotten back from spring training, and coronavirus was kind of just being talked about in the US. And we were kind of joking about it down in Arizona. And so I sent kind of an email, like tongue in cheek, to them, like, what is all this? Like, do we, and within 3 minutes, I got a call from Chris McGowan, and he very rarely calls me. And from that moment on, I realized how serious this was. They had been, the Blazers, because of Paul Allen's company, had been in Africa and Europe and China. And so they had already seen the impacts of the virus in some other countries. And they also have the Seahawks and a bunch of other entertainment companies in Seattle. And so they had already been working with the governor's office for a couple of weeks up in Seattle. And they were the ones that were really pushing, Chris Oxley with the Blazers was really pushing the state to close things down sooner rather than later. And so, and the Blazers were involved with the NBA too, of really trying to, get ahead of things to hopefully minimize the impacts. And so after that phone call, I just kind of paused, and then the next, I believe it was the next day or that night is when the NBA canceled. And then the next day it was just sitting in my office, just watching all the dominoes fall of all the sports teams canceling and the NCAA tournament and everything. And so we jumped on it right away and got as much information and facts as we could. We transitioned our office by March 18th to work at home, and then it probably took a few days for the shock to wear off. And then at that point, we realized, like, we've got 3 options here. We can, in any crisis, you can fight, flight, or freeze. And I could see there were already a lot of people and teams that were starting to freeze up, and they just were paralyzed, didn't know what to do. Some teams are just trying to hide from this. And we've always had the mentality that we're going to fight through anything. And so we rallied our staff and said, listen, this is going to be tough, but we're going to figure it out, and we're going to fight our way through this. And from that day on, that was probably around the 20th of March. We've had that kind of an attitude that, this is going to be a challenge for us, but it's nothing we can't get through. And I think the interesting part of this all along is no one knows what to do. Like, I've made a career out of asking other executives how they do something and learning from other people. And this is one you can't ask anyone. I can't call Chris McGowan, who's one of the best sports executives that I've ever met, and say, hey, how'd you deal with that pandemic, 8 years ago? How'd you get your team through it? How'd you get your business through it? none of us have ever been through something like this. And so I think it's kind of rallied the sports community where we're all trying to work together. We're all trying to get information together. The challenge has been getting information, and the challenge, obviously, with anyone's business has been trying to anticipate what's going to happen. And again, we've always done a good job of anticipating and kind of building models to be successful financially. And this is one that we haven't been able to do that. So really the first month of this, it's just kind of been, it was constant conference calls and video calls and all that kind of stuff. And when I look back, I'm like, man, I was really busy, but I don't think I achieved anything. Did a ton of spreadsheets that are now all irrelevant. And we certainly predicted a lot of things that most hasn't happened. But I look back, one of the around March 25th or so, within a few days, we've got the United Soccer League with the Timbers too, and we've got the Hops with minor league baseball. And so we've had access to kind of some national type resources with minor league baseball, major league baseball, the USL, and then the MLS. And the USL brought on a doctor from Johns Hopkins early on to talk to all of our teams. His name is Dr. Marty McCary. And I could sit here now and say everything that he predicted on March 25th has come true. He basically said, this is a very predictable disease. It has very clear trajectories, and we know exactly what's going to happen, and we know when it's going to happen. And he laid out the timeline from that day on of, okay, this is when it's going to peak in New York. This is when it's going to peak in the entire country. This is when we're going to start loosening some restrictions. This is when we're going to see our country starting to open up. This is when, we could potentially get back to live events. And his date for that was July. And everything so far has hit exactly on his timeline, which was really interesting. So he's a great follow on Twitter. I've started following him on Twitter, Dr. Marty McCary. Very, very, very smart guy. And he's followed other diseases. So at that time back in March, it gave us a lot of confidence that, okay, these, this really smart people know what they're dealing with, or at least they're starting to know what they're dealing with, and we're going to have a chance. And so we worked for the rest of March, all of April, just planning on what the ballpark would look like when we could get it open. Running models on a 20% capacity, 50% capacity. We didn't do anything on 100% capacity. We were hopeful that maybe we could get to that point back in March, but we already know how to run it on 100% capacity. So really doing all those other models. Could we break even? How much money would we lose? 50% was really the mark that we could get to a break even point with all the costs that would go into running the season. And then we started going throughout April and into May. Then we started going into all the safety precautions we would take, figuring out how to do a sporting event with social distance. How would we test players? The frequency would we test players? What would we do if a player did test positive, and what would be the protocol there? And we've done the same thing in the baseball as we have in the USL with the soccer team. And then, the last couple of weeks, so we felt very good mid-April and really into early May. We felt pretty confident that, hey, we can do this. I mean, it's going to be different. We're probably going to hand out masks to everyone, but there's a branding opportunity and a sponsorship opportunity. I always think, how am I going to monetize something? So, we put a big sponsor logo on the masks. We take people's temperature. We test our staff so we could tell our fans that, none of our staff has the virus, and we know that for certain. A lot of the hesitancy with the NBA, with Major League Baseball, and even with us was we needed states and the feds to ramp up testing and have it available, because we didn't want the PR nightmare of, well, hey, you can get testing for pro athletes, but my neighbor down the street can't get tested. And so that was a big concern of ours throughout the process. And even today, if we had to open up today, would still be a concern, because it just doesn't seem like we've gotten there on testing like we should have. But we had a lot of that stuff figured out. And then early May probably. And I know Erin Carlson's on the call. She knows this individual, Andy Dunn. Andy, I see her laughing. Andy was actually on the negotiating committee when we moved the team here. He's been in baseball a long time. He used to be the farm director for the Washington Nationals and now runs the Vancouver Canadians and the Lancaster Jethawks. And I was on a call with him, and he said, "This is great, Cale, you've done all this, but you realize that you're at the mercy of MLB." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "How is MLB going to send 160 teams to 160 different communities? You know, and then what happens when a player gets tested? They call off the seat." And so he started kind of giving me this shadow of doubt of how is MLB even going to send players out? And so that's when we started realizing our scale of 160 minor league teams a lot of times works for us. In this instance, it really works against us. And I think that's really over the last couple of weeks, we've realized that, man, this is going to be tough. I mean, do we have a shot still? Yes. You know, is it pretty slim? Probably. But, you know, just the logistics of getting all these players to spring training, getting them out to all their individual cities, that scale of 160 markets with 160 different protocols and governments and all that kind of stuff is really going to be a big challenge. And so, again, we have a plan to play a season, and we know we can do it. We're at the mercy of MLB at this point. And so now we're kind of in this waiting game of, and we think that the decision of MLB playing will trickle down to MILB, and all this fight with the Players Association will probably impact the minor leaguers as well. Oakland yesterday just announced they were laying off all their minor league players, which was pretty disappointing. The Angels have come out and they've laid off a lot of their player development staff and minor league players. We haven't heard from Arizona. They're still up in the air. All their people are being paid through the end of May, and we're hopeful they'll extend that. But you know, a lot of the hope that we had, you know, we still have hope, but really we're starting to generate that energy towards a summer. If we don't have a season, what are we going to do to keep fans engaged? What are we going to do to keep all our season ticket holders engaged? You know, what kind of events could we do without Hops baseball, if that's what's given to us, so we can still be, you know, an entertainment source and still be a big part of the community. Our community staff has been involved distributing meals to frontline workers. We have a new fundraising program coming out that has to do with masks here, hopefully within a day or two. I was hoping to have the news today, but we're still working things out with another partner. You know, so we're going to continue to raise money. We're going to continue to be involved in the community and kind of wait and see what MLB decides to do. I have a feeling that will be imminent in the next week or two. At least we're hopeful. You know, but it's out of our hands, and that's kind of the difficult part of our business right now. Is we always say we want to control the controllables, and this is something that is completely out of our control. So the best we can do is prepare and be ready for any situation. The really positive news and what's kind of compounding this situation for us is there's an agreement between Major League Baseball and minor league baseball called the Professional Baseball Agreement. Everyone refers to it as the PBA. And in the past, the PBA has been an 8-year agreement, and it's been kind of a rollover agreement with minor changes. And it's really the governing agreement between minor league baseball and Major League Baseball. Well, last fall, MLB decided that this PBA needs to be redone. And so from last summer, really, July, August, is when they started this process of developing what the terms of the new PBA would be. And there were media reports that came out in the fall. There's been a lot of media reports that have come out since. And the biggest change is going to be the change from 160 teams down to 120 teams. And every major league team would have 4 minor league affiliates: a AAA, a AA, a high A, and a low A. So short season baseball would go away, according to this proposal that has been talked about. So initially it was kind of like, oh, we're short season. Like, what does this mean for us? And from everything we've heard, from everything we've read in media reports, a lot of the media reports have said that the Northwest League would go to a low A format. So it would actually promote the Northwest League. So we're sitting back right now with, potential loss of a 2020 season, and then kind of the looming PBA of what's going to happen. And so much of that now has been done behind closed doors, so we can't even really get a lot of information. We're just relying on media reports we've read and kind of rumors that we're hearing. So, but it's very exciting. I mean, we could go from, if we do lose the 2020 season, we could go into a full season format potentially as early as next year. And from a financial impact standpoint, it decreases the impact to 1 year. Whereas a lot of teams, this is going to have an impact of 2, 3, 4 years, because the only way for teams to survive this is to take a lot of the money that has been collected already and move it to the next year. I think the challenge for our business, there's a lot of businesses that are going to lose 2 months of revenue, 3 months of revenue while things are shut down. The challenge for us is we're a seasonal business. So we spend money for 9 months on a season that happens for 3 months. So all of our revenue is collected between June, July, and August. Well, the timing couldn't have been worse for us because the coronavirus hit as we were spending all of our money getting ready for a season. And then all of a sudden, it's like shutting off the faucet come April, and zero revenue has come in, which we expected. But we've spent a lot of the money for our season, and so the money's not there. So if all of our season ticket holders, if all of our sponsors said, hey, I don't want to kick my money to 2021, I want a refund, quite honestly, we'd be out of business. We would have to get a loan, file bankruptcy. We'd have to do something, because we've spent most of that money getting ready for the summer, assuming that we were going to have our revenue streams in June, July, August. So seasonal businesses, and we're certainly not the only one. There's tons of seasonal businesses. I saw someone bring up the coastal towns. Seasonal businesses, I think, are going to have the hardest time and the hardest recovery with this. It's going to be a very slow recovery. I've got friends in AAA that they have much bigger problems than we do, and this is really going to drag out for them probably 2 or 3 years. So we're really crossing our fingers that the PBA goes our way, and that we have that information soon as well, because it will really help us communicate with our season ticket holders and fans that, hey, yeah, this sucked in 2020, but 2021 is going to be 10 times better, and going forward we're going to be an even much more viable franchise and much more successful franchise, and more opportunities too, whether it's for businesses, for people to enjoy themselves at the ballpark, that sort of thing. So from that, I mean, we did get the PPP. Shout out to Washington Trust Bank, who's our official bank, and they were outstanding in the PPP process. There's a lot of nightmares around that, but our experience couldn't have been better. And so our PPP runs out mid-June, and our owners have, I mean, a lot of people on the call probably know our owners. They're amazing people. They're community minded, and they've said from day one, our biggest goal is to protect our staff and to try to avoid layoffs and keep our team together. We have a team right now that we're really proud of. They've done an amazing job leading up to this and even through this. And it's a team that we don't want to have to rebuild. And if we have to, tear everything down to get through this and then rebuild, now we're just taking this problem and making it longer and longer and longer. And so we want to be able to come out of this August, September, going towards the 2021 season, ready to go, fully staffed and ready to hit the ground running. And so we're gonna take some measures starting in July, to decrease our liabilities, but more of a shared sacrifice. Instead of laying off a bunch of people and keeping all the high paid people, we're going to do more of a shared sacrifice across the board. Bring our payroll down as much as we can, but still keeping the team together and not kicking all our people to the streets or to unemployment. And hopefully by doing that, we'll be able to get going in September, October, and really hit the ground running for 2021. With that, I know I've seen some comments pop up. I'm not sure if they were questions or comments, but what's the best format for this, Deanna, if you want to open?
See if I could, well, I think that the mask thing is a big deal, KL. So people are really definitely wanting to have a Hops mask. And I think that Joan Calloway came up with a really great design. And then I think we had a couple of other questions. Let's see if I can get to them and read them. People on this call know I can't read this far away. So the Volcanoes are offering a slumber party fundraisers. Have you heard anything about that? And what about a barley slumber party?
Yeah, we the Volcanoes, we saw that Pensacola was actually the first team to put their stadium on Airbnb. And I don't remember how much it cost, but you can rent it for the night or whatever and kind of have the run of the ballpark. And I saw the Volcanoes kind of jumped on that right away. We'd have to go through the city. I mean, right now the stadium is being used for testing the parking lots, and so access is a challenge. We're hoping to open our office up on a modified capacity June 1st, and we're working with Parks and Rec in the city to create some access for that, and start to get our people back into the office on a limited basis, but just build some muscle memory of driving to the office again and knowing where your desk is going to be. So, and then, that we have a ton of retail too, because we're gearing up for a season. So we're going to do, especially for season ticket holders, do some nice retail discounts as we go into June, and I think that'll make some people happy. We don't discount retail very often, so this will be a summer to stock up.
Have you done a barley with a mask?
We haven't yet. No, I know our marketing team's got some things they're working on. Most of the stuff they don't share with me because I'll ruin the surprise. But we're working on a collab with Baseballism, and doing a mask with them. And so we have a call with them today to try to work out some details. But we're pretty hopeful that this will be a cool partnership, and we'll kind of combine and share the hard cost on it, and then we'll donate all of the proceeds, 100% of it, to a charity that we're working on right now.
Excellent, thank you. So another question from Aaron says, thank you for having Barley pop into classrooms. Would the teams be assigned a major league affiliate?
Yes, so a lot of that is still we're still waiting to hear some details, but what we've heard is that MLB teams, they kind of have a choice, but it's a much different affiliation process than in the past. And again, all of this is speculation at this point. And a lot of it we're reading in Baseball America or Ballpark Digest or some of those publications. So, we've had a great partnership with Arizona. We've been with them for 20 years now. And we've been in communication with them throughout this process. And, they've assured us that the relationship is still as strong as it's ever been. And, they want to be in Hillsboro. And so to my understanding, a lot of the MLB teams have been kind of surveyed by MLB I don't think MLB wants to rip affiliates away from major league teams, especially when they have such a strong relationship. But I do know that a priority early on in the fall was to try to regionalize things a little bit better. I mean, for example, the A's had a short season affiliate in Vermont. I mean, that just doesn't make a lot of sense when you're sending players across the country to play a half season for short season baseball. So, trying to get their affiliates a little bit closer and a little bit more regionalized, so it's easier to transfer players to and from.
There was also a question about the percentage of like personal versus business sponsorship and season and ticket holders. Do you know that percent breakdown?
Oh, yeah. You know what? We're much higher on personal. Most teams are probably 80% business wise from a season ticket standpoint. And we're probably around 60% business. So we have a lot more personal seats. And, I think it speaks to the fact that we just have like Portland Metro, Hillsboro, Beaverton. It's a great sports town, and people love sports. People are very supportive with their teams. And, so wherein fans might buy a mini plan in Spokane, they're buying half season or season tickets in Hillsboro. So the level of fan support here is much greater than it is in other markets.
The stadium setting is just so perfect, right? It's just, it's all about the ambiance and the support and yeah. So there's another question about, is there any update on the T2 league and if they will have a season this year?
Yeah, we probably have a better shot on Timbers 2 than we do on baseball, only because we have a lot more control over the players, at least the Timbers do. The challenge there is going to be playing with fans, and they have two scenarios right now where they're looking at kind of a pod scenario or a scenario to open in venues. I would imagine within 2 weeks, probably. I think they're looking at the June timeframe for a go, no go.
Excellent.
So we're still wait and see there too.
So another question was about, now I forgot what it was. Does Portland getting an MLB team help or hurt the Hops?
I think I've maintained from day one that it would help us. I think that having more baseball and having more kids inspired to play baseball and to go to baseball games just builds a bigger baseball community. I certainly think it makes us more competitive on what our value proposition is, and making sure that we're providing a return on investment for our fans that is greater than going to an MLB game. There's a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences in an MLB game and a minor league game. I think what we'd see is, we'd still see people going to Hops games, and we'd see them going to an MLB game too. And, I think the average cost of family for MLB is like $300 or something like that. For a Hops game, it's more like 60, 80. So the value proposition is just a lot different, and, it'll raise the profile of baseball. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Any other questions, folks? So I was going to ask about the model that the Hops, and I think, all of your league has, where they do homestays. The players have homestays. So do you see the virus as creating a situation where that's really no longer feasible, or that you'll have more difficulty of having that happen in the future?
Yeah, I think that's what's going to be really fascinating with this is say we have a vaccine in the next year, and the risk isn't near as great as it is now, but the fear that has been driven into people, right or wrong. I mean, whether it's, you can get into political decision, you can get into decision around media, you can get manipulative media, you can get into a lot of decisions, I think, when it comes to the fear around this. But the reality is there is fear, and the situation has created fear with people. And so will that fear percolate after we get a vaccine and after we get back to more of a normal life? To be seen. I mean, I think a lot of us have pretty short memories, and the fact that this has happened once in 100 years and once in our lifetime, can it happen again? Sure. Is it realistic? We don't know, because it's only happened once. So that's going to be the fascinating thing. There hasn't been any discussions around that at this point, that was definitely a concern when it came to return to play and sending players out to different communities, because there is communities all over the country that have host families, and we'd have to take some precautions certainly there. But in Oregon, again, the fear is there, but the numbers aren't. I mean, when it comes to infection rates and death rates and a lot of that kind of stuff, I mean, to me, it just really hasn't felt like the virus is here. We've been really, really lucky in Oregon relative to some other states.
Right. So there's someone is wondering about 4th of July fireworks.
Yeah, we had a game scheduled for 4th of July. So, that's actually a bill we've already paid. It's fireworks. So we're having some conversations right now around, can we do a drive-in fireworks show? Can we do a show where we just have social distance and people are out on the field? Do we get our money back and use it for payroll? I would imagine within the next week or two, we'll have that plan laid out. Now, obviously, we'll have to work with the city, with the Parks and Rec, with health officials to make sure that we had their blessing for anything that we did.
Excellent. So Representative Solomon says that the community would buy in, and by 4th of July, we're ready to see some fireworks. And, if you don't give them to us, we're going to make our own, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Well, she might have access to some other money too. So exactly. We'll make sure we keep you happy.
Exactly. Okay, folks, so you have this great opportunity. It's your turn now to ask questions. Josh.
I'll do one. Hi, thanks. Sorry for the interruption. I didn't lock my door. But so I think one of the more disappointing things sports-wise that has come out of this is the situation in Oakland that everybody heard about yesterday. But if you had to predict which way would that go? I mean, if we stretch further into the summer and things start getting pushed back, or we're not hitting goals of Major League Baseball in July or whatever it is, do you see the community and from the top down sort of stealing against this sort of treatment of minor league players, which it's a tough gig until you get to the big leagues, right? I didn't even know it was happening in Anaheim, I guess you said, or SoCal, wherever it was. But which way do you see that going? Because that could be a real, talk about years and years of effects from not being able to train players and develop them, et cetera, and have the pipeline.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest concern. I mean, I talked to Barry Enright, who was a pitching coach for us last year. He played in the major leagues for a number of years. And that's the Diamondbacks' biggest concern. And they keep pushing player development staff of when can we get back to training? When can we get back to training? Because they were they were only a few days into minor league spring training when all of this hit. And so minor league players really haven't had any time on the field. And to take it all away from them and maybe wait till the fall to do any sort of training, losing all those reps, losing all those innings, it definitely will set these guys back. And baseball, you have a window of prime that's like 4 or 5 years in your mid to late 20s and up to 30. And so taking 1 year away from that prime could be a great earning potential too. I mean, you could be talking tens of millions of dollars in earnings. And so I think that's why there's a big fight with the Players Association right now is the players are saying, yeah, you're going to cut my pay 1 year. They understand it, but they're having a year taken away from their big earning potential. And, anyone can agree or disagree with how much money these players make, but the reality is that it is what it is. And I think any of us, if you're in the prime of your earning potential and you're providing your family and your generational wealth, like that mentality, and you have a year taken away from you, you're gonna put up a fight, or you're gonna whine about it at least. So, but I've spent my career in the minor leagues. I've never worked in a major league sport, and so I have a real fondness and a heart for all the minor league players, and I see what these guys go through year in and year out, and I see the very small percentage of the guys that actually make it. And these guys struggle. There's no doubt. And they don't get paid very much. That's why they're in host families. But you know, they're striving to make it big someday. And so, you know, there's been a lot of talk around player salaries and everything else. There's been talk about the decrease with the new PBA of decreasing the amount of minor league players and minor league teams. That will provide more money to pay the players that are left more. You know, but the reality is it's going to cut a lot of jobs too. I mean, Diamondbacks have 6 affiliates right now, around 30 players a roster. So if they go down to 4, you're cutting 60 to 70 players that would have played. You're cutting about 10 coaches that would have coached. So, you know, you are cutting a significant amount of jobs. And, you know, is that the right decision or not? I think that's the big debate with minor leagues and major leagues. But at the end of the day, it's Major League Baseball's call. And if they want to kind of reset the system, they have the ability to do that. And then moving forward, it's just going to be a lot different. Hopefully it will be a catalyst to create a better situation for minor league players.
So Representative Solomon, I thought she was talking about sandwich condiments, but evidently not. The Portland Pickles are playing. How are they able to accomplish that? Do you know?
They're going to lose a bunch of money. And about half the teams in that league have opted out. So they're going to do a broadcast format, closed stadium, no fans. I know hopefully they've gotten around it, but I think they're running into some issues with the city and Parks and Rec of having their facilities still closed. And so I think they were actually running into some issues of being able to play. But they were going to do a broadcast model. And, you know, we've definitely considered that. But for us, the Pickles since they're an amateur team, they control their players. So they can determine whether they have players or not, where we're Major League Baseball decides our fate, and Arizona, in a way, decides our fate. So we have to rely on them to send us players or not.
So it is a real team, not a sandwich condiment. Sorry, no offense to. I just I guess I don't follow sports as closely as Representative Solomon. All right.
I have a question about the draft. This is if MLB is canceled, this will be the first professional league that goes a season or you know, without a high or a college season to draft from. You know, basketball still has something to look back on. How do you think that will work out? I mean, are they going to draft 2 classes in one draft, or will they just cancel a draft for a season, or has that even been batted around yet?
Yeah, it has. Great question. They're going to do a 5-round draft. So normally the MLB draft is 40 rounds or so, give or take. So they're going to narrow it down to 5, which is crazy. And so a lot of high school kids, a lot of college kids that would have been drafted will go into free agency now. I think we'll see a lot of kids go back to school for their senior year, which will hurt their bonus potential, because if they can come out as a junior, they have leverage to sign or not, because they could go back to school. As a senior, you don't have any leverage. It's either you sign your pro contract or you're done playing baseball. So, you know, I've talked to a few scouts that are pretty concerned, and they're basically just going to go off of fall ball and the reports that they had written up before on a lot of these guys. So this will be another, I think, ripple effect. This summer, the draft is gonna affect next year and the year after and the year after with some of these teams. And teams that had really bad seasons last year have they have a high draft slot this year. You know, when you have the number 1 overall pick, it's great, but it's even better to have the number 1 overall pick in every round. And then the more rounds you have, the higher draft picks you get. So now a team that would have had 10, 15 rounds of the number 1 pick in each round, they only have 5 rounds of that number 1 pick. And so there'll be an impact there from a talent wise from next year, the year after that. They haven't decided what they're going to do going forward with the draft, but it sounds like they're going to dramatically decrease it. And again, a lot of it has to do with there's just going to be a lot less minor league players now. And so players that would have been drafted in the 25th round as a high school or as a college senior, those guys probably won't get drafted anymore, which is really too bad.
It could be good for colleges. I mean, they might get a bigger pool of kids that are going to go to school instead of getting drafted right out of high school.
100%. Yep, 100%. Because the teams, if I had to bet, the teams won't take as many flyers on high school seniors. They're going to want more sure things, especially in this draft. They're going to want sure things, so they're going to take more college guys. And then in baseball, if you declare for college and you go to college, you got to play 3 years, which is different than a lot of other sports where you might be able to go one and done and go back to being a pro. Baseball, it's a much different decision. So it will impact college baseball probably in a very positive way.
All right, folks, any other questions? Still have plenty of time. So from a community perspective, KL, obviously you guys have been hugely involved in our community. And what is that looking like in terms of the investments you've made in our teams locally and around the region? Whether it's turf or, uniforms. Talk a little bit about what that impact has been for our local baseball teams.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been a big emphasis for us, and with our community fund, the Hillsboro Hops Fund, and actually many people on this call have donated to the Hops Fund through our various events, and they're a big reason for our contributions to the youth baseball softball community. This was a unfortunate timing year for us. We started a grant program back in January, February, and invited every youth sports organization team to submit their grant request. And we authorized almost $100,000 of grant requests cash that was going into the youth baseball softball community this year. And unfortunately, pretty much all these seasons have been canceled. A lot of these teams have reached out to us throughout the process through the last 2 months and said, hey, do you want the money back? And we've all said, no, keep it. You'll use it later. So we'll get that money into the communities. Unfortunately, a lot of it won't get used until the next season. But our Hillsboro Hops Fund, which is our charitable arm, has started to do pretty well. And we've gotten to the point now where a lot of the money that we're raising, we want to get back out there as quickly as we can to really start to make some big improvements in youth baseball, youth softball. So we were really excited for this year to make a big announcement and have a lot of these teams on the field and do a big press announcement of how much money that our charity was giving to the youth baseball softball community. But unfortunately, we're going to have to wait a year, and hopefully we'll be able to do another 100K or more next year.
Well, really, truly appreciate your philanthropic heart at the Hillsboro Hops. It's made a huge difference, and the diversity of teams that you supported and the diversity of grants that were given away, like I said, from uniforms to turf to, just really very unique. And the way that you've done it, I think, is just really to be applauded. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's one thing. I mean, it's nice to be in a community that cares and have a fan base that cares. And it's kind of the old statement, like, you can't do it without your fans. But really, for us, I mean, it's not necessarily just us giving a lot of this money away. We're a conduit, and the Hops will participate in some of the funding, but a lot of the funding is coming directly from our fans. And I think that's what's incredible about this community is we have people spending money buying tickets and merchandise and sponsorships and everything else. And then on top of that, they're also donating to our Hops Fund that then we can repurpose and grow our community, especially with the youth baseball, softball community. But it's a passion for us because, a lot of us grew up playing sports. That's why we work in sports. And we understand the benefits of being on a team and learning to work hard, learning to practice, learning to be a good teammate, learning to be a leader. All those things, the soft skills that sports teaches you, if we can now provide more opportunities for kids to play sports, and our sport happens to be baseball, but more kids to play sports, we know that the next generation is going to be they're going to be better people. They're going to be better kids, and they're going to grow up with better skills and more skills. And, you know, the more we can get kids off video games and sitting at home and get them out in parks, swinging a bat or catching a ball or throwing a ball, I think it's going to be better for our community altogether.
Well, I'm just wondering whether this pandemic and being sort of tied to your home is going to be the incentive we needed for them to understand, you know, when that's all you got, it's not that great, and I'll take advantage of every opportunity I have to go outside and do something where I'm moving my body and, you know, and building my strength.
Yeah. Well, I can see it from my household. We've got a 9-year-old going on 16, and you know, she's been pretty cooped up, but she's a very active kid, and I'm about to go put rims up on the backboards myself, since they've all been taken down, just so we can get out and she can shoot some baskets, or you know, but just get active, because yeah, the term stir crazy is an understatement when you've got those kids. They want to get out and they want to be active.
Yeah, huge challenge for parents trying to balance all of those things. Education, now they're, you know, sort of teachers, and all the things we've learned out of this. To your point of, you know, there was no blueprint that we took off the shelf of how do we react in a pandemic, because we've never, you know, so we're all kind of, you know, that sort of almost tired saying of we're in this together. You know, we all had the same starting point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell sort of, you know, I think these have been really impressive leadership moments where folks stepped up, and on that, you know, whether we started at the same point, but we're not all going to end at the same point. And I do think that it's going to be telling about, you know, who showed up in this important stage, if you will, of opportunity for leadership.
Yeah, that's been the fun part. Yeah, I mean, we've got teams in our league that you kind of look around our league, and there are teams that are really stepping up and providing kind of framework for other teams, and there's other teams that they've laid off their staff and are just in a shutdown mode until it passes. So it's really interesting being in the same industry as, you know, 7 other people, and seeing the different decisions that are being made. It's fascinating.
Hey, I've got a question. I saw that ESPN signed a deal with the Korean baseball leagues. If that's going forward, how is their league structured? Is it similar to the MLB with individual ownership and that kind of stuff and collective bargaining, or are those players being forced to play or willing to play? And also, has the MLB looked at maybe modeling their system or reopening, you know, with no fans, if that's going to be an option, if they looked at other countries that are ahead of us on the curve, I guess?
Yeah, Korean baseball was the first league to restart. The Japan league, the Nippon League, I think is what it's called. They're about to restart as well. They're all doing it with no fans. And similar structure. The pay scale is much different. It's much lower in those countries than it is in Major League Baseball. But very similar structure. I think a lot of the teams are actually owned by companies in at least in the Japanese league. I'm not sure about the Korean league. MLB, they will definitely restart with no fans and more of a broadcast only model. I think their hope is if they can get going in July, no fans, maybe they can transition to a limited capacity facility, and generate some revenue that way. But, you know, in a lot of cases, until you get over 50% of your capacity, it just doesn't even make sense to open to fans. You're adding so much more costs with additional staffing and security and all the PPE you'd need, and, you know, and all that kind of stuff. It's almost better to just do the broadcast only model. The biggest difference between the two leagues is just the amount of money that's at stake, and the attitudes of players giving into owners and owners giving into players. You know, it's really hard, and this is why I have to stay off Twitter. It's really hard to have sympathy of billionaires fighting with millionaires, but I think both sides are worried about the precedent they set, and they are going into a CBA agreement, a new CBA agreement, collective bargaining agreement, I think next year or the year after. So they have a CBA that's expiring. So both sides are really worried about the impacts they make right now and what that has on the impact that has on their negotiations of their new collective bargaining agreement. And the last proposal was like a revenue share model. And that's why that was a non-starter, because they're worried that if they set the tone of a rev share right now, that could be the starting point for the CBA discussions in a year or so from now. I think, to me, one thing that's going to be really interesting, taking my baseball hat on and just more of a sports hat, but I mean, right now the NFL is moving forward with full stadium plans. Now, I'm sure a lot of teams are behind the scenes working on models of what decreased capacity would be like, but they're very bullish on full stadiums. And the Raiders put their tickets on sale. They move into Vegas. They put their tickets on sale and sold out every game, every seat in a matter of hours, like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that. So same thing with college Division I sports, you know, seeing what's going to happen with University of Oregon, Oregon State. You know, are they going to have fans? Are they even going to have kids on campus? And can they play football without kids on campus? And those decisions that are being made too are going to be really interesting to watch this summer. We have there has been a coalition put together. The Blazers and Timbers are leading it, but we're on it. Oregon's on it. Oregon State, UP, Portland State, Rose Festival, and some other big festivals and sporting events in town to help the governor's office kind of create a framework of a safe opening of sports venues. And so that's been a real positive discussion, and something that I think was really smart by the Blazers and Timbers to try to get ahead of that, to where we can help set some of those guidelines versus them being handed down to us and then us trying to figure out how to do it with what's been given to us. So hopefully, you know, within the next couple of weeks, we'll have a lot of that kind of negotiated, so to speak, with the governor's office, and know what would be required of a lot of us to open our venues.
Well, to your point, Cale, that I know restaurants are going through the same thing as they're looking at, you know, a June 1 potential reopening date, and the restrictions around that for, you know, 25% or 50%. At some point, with the infrastructure you need just to, you know, run the restaurant, doesn't pencil out. And
yeah.
And that's a huge concern of, you know, how many of those businesses are we going to lose? And to me, the restaurants are part of the fabric of our community. You know, locally owned restaurants really demonstrate and showcase the community and the flavor of the community. And I would say that our sporting events do as well. You know, it's a place where we can go and be together and, you know, and celebrate together. So,
well, and to that point too, the point we've tried to make to the governor's office is, a lot of our stadiums you can't put in the same bucket as, you know, a community center or something like that. Like the size and the scale and indoor outdoor, it actually really leads and provides a good social distance experience. I mean, you know, we have a massive grass berm, we have a big seating bowl that we could get 2,000 people in our venue pretty comfortably, and everyone would be 6 feet apart. We could create, you know, lines at the concession stands, or we could do mobile ordering. We could restrict restrooms. Like it's not that hard to create a social distance game experience because of the size. Whereas if you just took, you know, the event capacity and said, well, you can't have an event over 250 people, you know, then it doesn't make any sense for us. But if you said you can have an event and you just have to provide these guidelines, 6 feet apart, people wear masks, you know, yada, yada, yada. Okay, that's no problem. We can figure that part out. So I think helping to try to drive that discussion will be a real positive for us. And that's what will give us a chance of opening our venues this summer.
Right. So the limitation of people together, you know, like, what is it, 50 now in phase 1, is a one size fits all.
Yeah.
And you're saying to them, it doesn't have to be, right?
Yeah, if your venue is, you know, 100,000 square feet versus 10,000 square feet, right, why would you be, you know, have to make that same number work? Right.
Well, certainly if there's anything we can do to help support that, would that be phase 2 potentially, Cale?
They're trying to get it into phase 2 because the Timbers are trying to get open. And the Timbers would open with no fans, but I know the Timbers are pushing hard for that to be into phase 2.
Yeah, excellent. Well, like I said, if there's anything we can do to assist you with that, I know that we serve on the Governor's Regional Solutions Task Force and see guidance and send it out for comment. And so we can certainly participate in providing comment to that of, that the one size fits all is probably not the way to go on those venues.
Excellent. Okay, excellent.
All right, folks, any final questions? Kale, thank you so much for sharing your time.
My pleasure. Yeah, my
Really
pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great to hear the process that you guys have gone through to really think about this. And and I think that many of us will learn from, listening to you and the process that you went through to make that determination. I know our businesses who are, looking at that June 1 date and, wondering how they might plan through that and think through that, have benefited from your conversation with us today. So thank you.
Good. It's been an exciting time, both in a good way and a bad way. But I think it's all about attitude, and we can definitely control our attitudes and just be as positive as we can towards it and try to find solutions. That's all we can do.
Right.
But thanks for having me. Really, really appreciate it.
Well, and the only thing I would say finally is just, as we go into this June 1 potential date, we haven't been approved yet, which is mind-boggling to me. But I would just ask everybody to be careful, right? The last thing we need is some sort of spike that drags us back down. We have 21 days after we get into June 1. Follow the rules, follow the regulations, encourage everyone else to do that as well. So we can stay healthy and open back up again, and we can, play ball, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, we'll cancel the pool party we were going to do.
Exactly. All right. Thank you guys all very much. I appreciate your time. We're back here tomorrow with Tom Engel talking about planning for HR. So as you bring your teams back, what should that plan look like? What alternatives should you be thinking about? So it'll be a good one. Hope you can join us. Thank you.